I was frankly afraid to go to work in Hollywood. I was fascinated, I was excited, but afraid to be crushed. I was afraid to lose my identity as a filmmaker. I had heard so many stories, and I was not considering myself better than the others. If it happened to this guy or this guy, why it will not happen to me? Isn't it lovely that we are in 2024 and we still need claps? I love that.
If you want to fight with us, first thing you must learn to be one with the desert.
There's all these stories of how long you've been dreaming of making Dune and reading the books as a teenager. But it strikes me that it was a project that you needed time to make.
Absolutely. I needed to get some muscles as a filmmaker in order to be able to bring that home. I was always cautious not to put myself in a zone where I will not be strong enough, not to skip the steps. And through the years, many times I declined offers because I was feeling I wasn't ready.
I want to jump in and talk about one film, one of my favorites, INCENDES.
Yeah, INCENDES is a very important project in my career. It's an adaptation of a play written by Wajdi Mouawad, a Lebanese author that was born in Beirut, and then because of the war, his family moved to Montreal. The play itself is a masterpiece about this crazy journey of two twins that at the death of their mother will have to go back in the country of their origin and to find out the truth about their origins. And that story that was set in the Middle East strangely had strong resonance with me. I felt very intimately linked. Despite the fact that it was happening at the other end of the world, there was something that it was saying that was deeply meaningful to me. And I remember coming out of the play, and my wife at the time said to me, "Oh my God, you're going to do a movie again." Because I saw the play at a period of time where I had decided to stop making film for a while. I wanted to learn my craft. I wanted to know more about how to direct actors, how to write. And I was through that process of learning because I was not satisfied with my two first features. And I wanted to make sure that the next time I will take a camera in my hands, I will finally be happy with the results. But when I saw INCENDES, that's the moment where I felt I had finally something meaningful in my hands that it will be relevant to go back to cinema. INCENDES was the first movie I've made where I felt home because as a filmmaker. Prior to that, I was feeling that I was like a film student that was like influenced by many masters before me, and I was like referring to or having always the images from others in my mind as I was shooting. INCENDES was the first movie where I felt sovereign, autonomous, making images only in relationship with the reality in front of me, not having all those ghosts inside my head. So it's the first movie that I really feel that I feel it was mine. It was these images were mine.
You took 5 years to adapt that. Right?
Yes, it was a long process. I took my time because it was not an easy one. I think that I've learned most of what I know about screenwriting today working on that project. The structure, about the development of a character, about everything I've learned from INCENDES helped me to work on Dune. Most importantly also is that as I was doing INCENDES has been shot in Jordan.
Yeah.
And as I was shooting INCENDES, I needed to find very specific locations. And it was a very intense scout that spent weeks of work. And I remember seeing landscape that I was saying to myself, this will not fit in INCENDES. It is not for INCENDES, it's for something else. If it is for that sci-fi movie that I'm dreaming to do one day in the future, maybe. That I said to myself, if ever I do a movie like Dune, I have to come back here. And so it's like building blocks like that, but there's a bit of INCENDES in Dune. Where you shoot a scene as it incredible impact, of course, on the mise en scène and on the meaning itself. Each location has to be chosen in order to describe the inner psychology of the character, what the character is going through. It's part of the arc of the character. It's like it says something. It's tremendously meaningful. Yeah.
There's something here thematically that in rewatching your films I started to see. He said, how can we evolve and not repeat the same mistakes that we are doing over and over again? And to a certain degree, with INCENDES too, that was about the family breaking these cycles. There seems to be thematically something.
It's something that is I'm obsessed by, this idea of breaking the cycles, the compulsions, the obsessions that are coming from our genetics or our education, or how can we evolve? How can we stop making over and over and over again the same mistakes as a species? It's something that I'm obsessed by, and that is, I think, sadly relevant today. Yeah. When I did INCENDES and went to Academy Awards, that's where I start to get offers about screenplays. But there's one that kept popping in the back that stayed in my mind for what it was saying about the cycle of violence and power of faith, and it was Prisoners. And meanwhile, I was developing on the other side a project with a friend of mine called Enemy, an adaptation of José Saramago, The Other Like Me, a tiny project, and both were greenlit at the same time. We made a case to the studio in Hollywood to ask them to wait, because I was feeling that it would be clever to do a smaller film in English, my first English movie, with a small crew in Canada, something that would be much more experimental. And in the back of my mind, the idea was, I was frankly afraid to go to work in Hollywood. I was fascinated, I was excited, but afraid at the same time. I was afraid to be crushed. I was afraid to lose my identity as a filmmaker. I had heard so many stories, and I was not considering myself better than the others. I'm saying, if it happened to this guy or this guy, why it will not happen to me?
And Enemy becomes your identity in your back pocket.
Exactly.
If Prisoners makes you something you're not.
Exactly. If ever it all goes down the drain and I'm crushed and I'm kicked out of Hollywood, they say, what the fuck is that movie? They could also say, oh, Villeneuve is there. And that
he made the strange one of the kids too.
There was that back of my mind that I will have an anchor, like someone who's doing a rock climbing, and I had something solid somewhere, that an anchor that will help me not to fall down the cliff. The Enemy was that anchor.
I want to talk about working with Jake. Obviously, he's been working with great actors beforehand, but this is a Hollywood star. Because I imagine when one thinks about the fears of what Hollywood could do to it, I think probably cast is probably part of it.
Yeah, working with Jake is one of the best things that happened in my life. I was floored by his skills as an actor. I think that I had the chance to work with him at first because he was in need at the time of to work with indie filmmakers. And I came to him with the idea of a laboratory, acting laboratory. But the Enemy, at the heart of the project, it was a gift that I was giving to myself. I was feeling at the time that I had very strong artistic complicity with the cinematographers, with composers, with editors, but actors, I was feeling always that they were coming and landing on the set, and I didn't feel that I had created that bond, that artistic bond to explore more. So the idea technically was really to put the actors at the epicenter, the center of the creative process, and to create that small laboratory where we will just improvise, try different techniques. And I think that really, first of all, Jake believed me and he got excited by the idea. I felt he gave him 200% of that project.
You have a respectable job. You have a nice apartment. And since we have been frank here, I think you should quit that fantasy of being a third-rate movie actor. Eat those. You want some coffee?
When we did Enemy, we were like, it was made by a band. We were like very few people, and we all thought nobody will see ever that movie. We were making this movie for ourselves, for our own pleasure. Sometimes you have to make movies like that. You have to, and it's a project that is one of my most personal. There's no compromise in Enemy. You know, it's a movie that is quite And Jake was absolutely at the center of that project.
There's also an element of entering that character's mental space visually. Do you know? There's an element here of entering a space that could be viewed as abstract or sci-fi, and trusting that the audience is going to understand where we are. It feels like a small building block if I look at the two films prior to this one.
Yeah, it's a challenging movie, and I mean it's a movie that it trusts the audience a lot, and some people when they embark in the journey find it playful and joyful. Others are frustrated because it can be quite abrasive. It's a puzzle. It's an enigma. And it's a movie that you need to watch a couple of times in order to understand it, I think. And these are the movies I love. That's the movies that I crave when I was a teenager. Those enigmatic movies.
You were worried Hollywood, I think the quote was, destroy you. Prisoners, why didn't it? What was that experience like?
I kept saying to myself that as I was shooting that after a couple of days, someone will tap on my shoulder and will say to me, listen, we love your accent, you're very friendly, but here's your plane ticket and thank you. And we'll go on from there to trust us. And it didn't happen. In fact, it was the first time that people were giving me everything that I needed to bring the movie home. The movie had some ambitions, which was to control the climate. When I was used at home to improvise with the weather. In a French Canadian movie, if you wrote the scene and it's supposed to be hot and sunny, and you are in pouring rain, you will shoot in the pouring rain. There's no choice. That's not. There's no option there. It's like you have to shoot. And I was used to improvise. I was used to adapt very quickly to the environment. This time, it's a movie that needed to control environment, somewhere where we will feel that the story happened over a few days, where there's a deterioration of the climate, where we go from cold rain to snow, and where I wanted to not see a peak of sunlight during the movie. So it required a structure.
Whoa! Hey, don't move! Hey! Whoa! Look out! Hey, don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! All right, so
There was like a very precise color palette, yes, that was like there to create a claustrophobic feeling. And that was one of the key elements of a visual approach to create that increasing pressure on the character. It was the first collaboration with Roger Deakins. I would say that one of my big fantasy, desire, dream when I came to work in Hollywood, that I was one day had the chance to work with a legendary cinematographer, someone that will be a master on his field and to learn from him.
I am curious about Sicario. What was that experience shooting that with Roger?
One thing that happened as we were doing Sicario that reminds me to listen to the landscape. It was the storms at the end of each day that were happening as we were shooting, but that was not part of the screenplay, but it brought that kind of ominous feeling to the scene. So we were, instead of avoiding them, we started to chase them and to make sure that we'd get as close possible to them in order to bring that firepower to the screen. It was like a boot camp for what will come in the future when we shot DUNE, where it's there with much bigger units and much more challenges.
One thing that was interesting to me in rewatching Arrival, in some ways it almost feels like the most hopeful of your films.
Absolutely. I did 5 movies that were quite dark, and I would say increasingly dark, because when you go from Incendies to Prisoners to Sicario, I mean, it's like it's not Stairways to Heaven. It's the opposite. You go to hell. It's like it's darker and darker. And I remember saying to myself that I will be able to go back in the darkness as I was doing to Sicario, knowing that Arrival was next, knowing that finally I will approach reality with hope. The biggest special effect in the Arrival is Amy Adams. Amy and I agreed right from the start that we will need to be as honest as possible, and that if someone watching the movie twice will not feel cheated. Despite the time distortion, her emotional journey would absolutely make sense. I think that was the key of success to Arrival.
Memory is a strange thing. It doesn't work like I thought it did. We are so bound by time, by its order.
I remember being in the editing room with Joe Walker and saying to ourselves, we are fighting against 100 years of cinematic language, where when someone sees something and thinks it's a flashback, to re-engineer the thinking behind that, it was like a lot of work in the editing room.
How can you know the future? I don't understand. Who is this child? Wait. No, wait.
That idea of where we are looking into the future, looking into the back, and what's going on mentally, that idea that it could feel emotionally true. But
yeah, the thing is that I think that what interests me here is not the magical idea, the idea that something surreal, such as having visions of the future, could actually exist. What interests me is about our intuition, about our deep human feelings that we foresee. Sometimes we feel that something will happen, or we say, how many times we say in our lives, I knew this would happen. I felt it. And it's not something magical, it's the power of intuitions. And that I'm truly fascinated by that.
Don't resist.
Talk to me, Jarvis.
You see only fragments. You cannot see the future without seeing the past.
was Dune in the back of your head at all as you're making Arrival?
It is strangely, it was an obsession. It's something that kept popping out when people were asking me, specifically in Los Angeles, what will be your dream project? The only thing that popped out in my mind that was always Dune. In the Arrival, it was the first time that I was working with VFX on that scale, to learn how to instruct and give guidance to animators to go exactly in the direction I wanted, how those creatures will behave. There was this idea also trying to stay in a very close, intimate relationship with sci-fi, and that the big spectacle will always in some ways stay in the background. Because at the end of the day, when you look at Dune, it's not the sci-fi element, the technology is really in the background, and that's something I'm not focusing on. It was seen from the human's point of view, very grounded.
You young pup. You young pup.
It feels like with Dune, you were really able to direct that in a way where your focus was on exactly what it needed to be. It could be as intimate as it was.
It's a project that I will never dare to approach without having learned my craft. And through the years, in different ways, I learned different things that helped me to let's say, attack this adaptation. I was dreaming to bring the adaptation of that book that I had not seen on the screen yet.